Hello, welcome back. Ignore the change of scenery. I am waiting to clock in at work, so I figured usually during this time I would read. Might as well read now. So, welcome back. Book we're reading. It has reflective bits. That's cute. Okay. Anyway, I don't have a lot of time and I want to get some reading in before I go, so let's get started. It also just clicked in my head that this book takes place in England, so I'm like, should I read it in an accent? Maybe. Who knows? Chapter 5. Violet. Violet straightened her green dress as she followed Father and Cecil. I don't like the name. Cecil out of the room. She'd barely been able to eat a thing, and not just because Miss Kirkby had made rabbit pie. She had tried not to think of silky ears and delicate pink noses as she chewed. Father had asked her to accompany him to the drawing room after dinner. The drawing room, furnished with an oppressive dark tartans, was where Father enjoyed the post-prandial glass of port in silence, observed by the stuffed head of an ibex that hung over the chimney piece. Women were forbidden, apart from Miss Kirby, who had lit an unseasonable fire in the grate. "Close the door," Father said, once they were inside. As she swung the door shut, Violet saw Graham glower at her from the corridor. He had never been invited to the drawing room before. He'd never been invited to the drawing room, though perhaps that was a good thing. Violet turned back to Father and saw that his face had taken on the ashen hue that usually signaled grave displeasure. Her stomach flipped. Father stalked over to the drinks trolley, where crystal decanters sparkled in the firelight. He poured himself a generous glass of port before sinking into an armchair. The leather squeaked as he crossed his legs. He did not invite her to sit down, though the only other chair in the room, an Esther wing back, was rather too close to the fire and Cecil to be inviting. "Violet," Father said, crinkling his nose as though her name offended him in some other way. "Yes, Father?" Violet hated how thin her voice sounded. She swallowed, wondering what she had done. He normally only bothered to discipline her when Graham was around. Otherwise, she largely escaped his notice. For the second time that day, she thought of the incident with the bees and winced. He leaned over to stoke the fire violently so that it sat pale ash onto the richly patterned Turkish carpet. Cecil yelped, then began to growl in Violet's direction. Deducing that she must be the cause of his master's displeasure, a vein jumped at Father's temple. He was silent for so long that Violet was beginning to wonder whether she could just creep out of the drawing room without him noticing. "We need to discuss your behavior," he said finally. Her cheeks grew hot with panic. "My behavior?" "Yes," Father said. "Miss Poole tells me that you have been climbing trees." He spoke the last two words slowly and clearly, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was saying. "Apparently you ripped your skirt? I'm told it is ruined?" He stared into the fire, frowning. Violet twisted her hands, which were by now slick with sweat. She hadn't even noticed the tear, snaking the full length of the wool skirt until Nanny McCalf had collected it for the wash. The skirt was ancient anyway and far too long, with horribly prissy pleats. Secretly, she was glad to be rid of it. I'm sorry, Father." His frown deepened, creasing his forehead. Violet looked to the window, forgetting that the blackout curtains were drawn. A fly buffeted its tiny body against the fabric in desperate search of the outside world. The whir of its wings filled Violet's ears, and she didn't hear what Father said next. "What?" she said. "I beg your pardon, Father." "I beg your pardon, Father," she repeated, still watching the fly. I was saying that you have one last chance to conduct yourself appropriately as befits my daughter. Your cousin Frederick is coming to stay with us next month on leave from the front." He paused, and Violet braced herself for a sermon. Father often talked about his time fighting in the Great War. Every November he made Graham polish his medals in preparation for Armistice Day, when he had the entire household gather in the first sitting room for a minute of silence. Afterwards he gave a repetitive speech about valor and sacrifice that seemed to get longer every year. "No, it's not about real fighting," Violet said. Violet had heard Dinsdale, the gardener, mutter to Miss Kirkby once after a particularly long address. "Spent most of his time in the officers' mess with a bottle of port, I'd wager." Father had seemed almost gleeful when war was declared again in 1939. He had immediately commanded that Graham and Violet set about gathering conkers from the horse chestnut trees that lined the drive. Apparently, the round seeds, glassy as rubies, were bound to be indispensable in the production of the bombs that would explode all over Germany. Send the Boche to the kingdom come. Graham collected hundreds of the things, but Violet couldn't bear to think of the beautiful seeds coming to such a grisly end. She secretly buried them in the garden, hoping that they would grow anew. Fortunately, Father soon lost enthusiasm for the war, kept from enlisting by a lame knee and duties to the estate, and forgot all about this assignment. But there was no martial sermon tonight. Marital sermon tonight. But I expect you on your best behavior around Frederick, Father continued. Instead, Violet thought this was all very odd. She couldn't remember ever hearing about a cousin called Frederick, or any cousin at all, for that matter. Father never spoke of any relations, not even his parents and older brother, who had died in an accident before she was born. This subject, too, was forbidden. She had once received 3 stinging raps on the hand for asking about it. "Consider it a test. If you fail to conduct yourself appropriately during this visit, then I'll have no choice but to send you away for your own good." "Away?" "To finishing school. You'll need to learn to behave properly if you have any chance of making a match. If you can't show me that you're capable of comporting yourself like the young lady you are, there are several institutions that may be suitable for the task. Collecting grubby leaves and twigs like some sort of savage will be permitted." He lowered his voice. "Perhaps they can stop you from turning out like her." "Her?" Violet's heart fluttered. Did he mean her mother? But Father ignored her question. "That's all," he said, looking up at her for the first time. "Good night." There was a strange expression on his face, as if he were looking at her but seeing someone else. Violet waited until she was safely alone in her bedroom before she let the tears fall. She wept quietly as she changed into her nightdress and got into bed. After a while, she tried to steady her breathing, but it was no good. The air in her little room tasted stale, and not for the first time she had the feeling that she was out of place in the hall, as a fish was in the clouds. She longed for the sturdy embrace of the beech tree, for the night breeze on her skin. The snippet of conversation she overheard when she was younger rang in her ears. So much like the young lady, not just in looks. Had her mother been like this too? Had nature pulled at her heart the same way it pulled at Violet's now? What could possibly be so wrong with that? Sighing, she kicked off the coverlay. After turning out the lamp, she crept over to the window, pushing aside the horrid black-out curtain, and opened the sash. The moon shone like a pearl in the dusky sky, lighting up the cragged hills. There was a gentle wind, and Violet heard the trees shift and murmur. She closed her eyes, listening to the hoot of an owl, the flap of a bat's wing, a badger wrestling on the way to its burrow. This was home, not the hall with its dingy corridors and endless tartan and the fret of Father hulking around every corner. But if she was sent away, she might never see any of it again. The owls, the bats, the badgers, the old beach that she loved, and its village of insects. Instead, she'd be cloistered indoors and forced to learn all the manners of useless conversation skills and rules of etiquette. Also, that father could offer her up to some grizzled old baron or another, as if she were something to be bartered with for favors, or something to be rid of. But no, he wouldn't send her away. She wouldn't let him. When she left Orton Hall, she imagined herself moving deftly through a jungle, brushing against ferns dripping with beetles. It would be on her own terms, not father's, nor anyone else's. She'd be here, she vowed to herself, not at some horrible finishing school. When winter came to take the leaves from the trees, she would even stay inside if that was what it took, just until the visit from the dullard relative was over. That would show father how well behaved she could be. Well, that's the end of chapter 5. Hate to cut this short, but I got to go work. I'll probably be back on my break, and I'll just look a little more disheveled than usual. Hope you enjoyed that short little chapter. It was great reading. Sorry that I can't read today, but look forward to seeing you guys again. Hope you have a great rest of your day. See you later. Bye.